Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video on my Mossberg 590 short-barreled shotgun. Views on videos lately have been a little bit slow, so I figured what can I do to hopefully get everyone back on board, and I figured a video on a cool NFA gun should be the ticket. Fingers crossed, we'll see how this actually turns out. But this is something I've had for about a year and a half now. A little bit of background. I have always had a fascination with short-barreled shotguns or SBSs. I would go like every 6 months I'd have this urge that like I just need an SBS, and I'd watch a ton of videos on SBSs, and then it would wear off and I'd go back and forth. And then for my birthday back in 2020, kind of in the midst of the craze of buying firearms, I was able to get my hands on a 590 Shockwave, and I decided I was finally going to get into the SBS realm, and here we are. So I did do a NFA Form 1 on this guy. Took 124 days, a little bit unusual, but nonetheless, I got it back. I didn't even bother shooting this thing in the pistol grip only or PG firearm configuration. Did all my shooting in the short-barreled shotgun configuration, and we're going to talk about what my thoughts are on it overall now that I've got several hundred rounds through it. So let's go ahead, roll in some footage of this thing in action over the last year and a half, and then we'll dive into how this thing is set up and what my thoughts are on it overall. So first up, the paint job obviously is going to be one of the first things you notice, other than the fact that it's a short-barreled shotgun. And the paint job on this thing is just a simple rattle can job that I did, just with some light and dark green stripes, with a little bit of browns mixed in there. And then I laid over some basically laundry netting to get some of that snakeskin look, and works simply enough for me. The exception obviously is this black Velcro patch here on the side of the receiver, as we'll cover later, but it is what it is. I'm a big fan of rattle canning guns, excuse me. You might not be able to see it in the darkness, but the FAL over there is one of my most recent rattle can jobs. Anyway, just something that I'm a big fan of doing, and so I had to do it to this guy to make it a little bit more practical. But starting up at the front, something I have done with every Mossberg shotgun that I've had over the years is adding one of these excess big dot front sight posts. So this started back with my first nice Mossberg, which was a full-size Mossberg 590A1, bayonet lug and everything else cool like that, and it came with a blacked out front sight, which I thought was really odd that for a tactical shotgun you would have a blacked out bead, which completely makes it unusable in low light conditions, which I feel like would be a lot of the conditions where I'd be using a shotgun, but whatever. So I looked around, found the excess big dot front sight posts, put it on that one, had a great experience with it, and now every practical shotgun that I've had since then has one of these excess big dot front sight posts. So that gives me a tritium vial in the middle, so it's going to glow in the dark, and then I've got that big white golf ball to find during the day, and it just makes target acquisition very fast and very easy and very intuitive for anyone that I've handed this shotgun to. So definitely good stuff there. Now moving down into the rest of the gun, other than the stock back here, we're looking at pretty much a factory 590 Shockwave. So we've got the threaded on end cap here, which does have a little sling stud if you wanted to use a sling that way. We've got the standard polymer front end pump up here, or forend. It does have the little loop in here, which makes a lot of sense in the pistol grip only version of this. However, I really don't find myself using it. If I am inside it, it's purely incidental. Most of the time I'm just wrapped around it. This is probably going to be being swapped out at some point. This is one thing where I feel like people need to be more aware of this. When I bought this, I had intended on putting one of the Magpul forends on here with M-LOK so I could put a light on it. However, I found out after I bought that the Shockwave action arm, or the pump assembly, is different than the standard 590. So in order to install one of those Magpul forends, you have to do a lot of modification to it. Now, there's a bunch of videos on YouTube on how to do that, but honestly, it was more work than I wanted to do, especially with what I had in mind for this. So I just went back to the factory pump, although I will probably be swapping this out for one of these Streamlight Racker forends, which has their 1000 lumen light in it, just because that'll make it a little bit more, again, practical. Because as of now, I have no means of mounting a light to it, and that is kind of the biggest shortcoming of it as it's currently configured. Now, the barrel on these is just over 14 inches, so as many of you probably know, the minimum overall barrel length, or minimum barrel length you can have on a shotgun in the United States is 18 inches, with an overall length of at least 26 inches, which is why the Shockwave is what it is, with a long bird's head grip that gets it to that minimum overall length, even though it has a shorter barrel length. But because it's not a stock, anyway, not going to get into the NFA stuff, but in order to put a stock on something like this, because the barrel is shorter than 18 inches, you have to file the paperwork to make it a short-barreled shotgun. Lots of videos out there on how to do an NFA Form 1, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into it here. But once that was approved, I went ahead, took off the bird's head grip, and then threw on one of the Magpul SGA stocks. These are currently my favorite shotgun stocks. It's a good balance between a pistol grip and the sporting grip. I'm never a fan of pistol grips on shotguns. It always seems to be exceedingly uncomfortable. So these find a good balance here. Now, really quick, I get a lot of weird comments about people saying I leave price tags on guns. This is not a price tag. If you work in a gun store, you are very aware that privately owned guns from employees have to be marked so that the ATF can say, well, hey, or they can't say, hey, why is that gun not in your books? And I can say, well, it's a personally owned firearm. And if it was big enough for you to read it on camera, it says, you know, personal firearm, not for sale, name, serial number. So that's what that is. If you're ever curious why I got these blue tags hanging around on all my guns, anytime I bring a gun to work, they have to be labeled, and it's just easier to not have to keep taking them on and off. I just leave them on my guns when I'm at the range, typically. So that's what that is. And then one thing I did add that's optional with the Magpul stocks is the little sling loop here. That way I can attach a sling. Now, the sling that I've been using for the entirety of my time with this shotgun is one from Sly Tactical. I actually really like this sling. I've got a couple other slings from them on a couple other firearms, and I'm honestly a huge fan, but it just lets me single point in here. Now, I'm ordinarily not a fan of single point slings. However, this is the one exception because of the gun's short length and the fact that it's a pump action. I don't want a sling getting in the way of my forend or just getting a positive grip on it, so I have it mounted singly back here. If it's a semi-auto shotgun or a longer shotgun, then I'm able to work with it a little bit more, but in this case, single point is going to work just fine for me, and it has worked really well. And these Sly Tactical slings work really well, and I need to do a video on these. It's honestly long overdue. They do some really cool stuff that you don't see other sling manufacturers doing or paying attention to, so I guess a little teaser for that. Now, lastly, obviously in the receiver here, we have your standard Mossberg fare going on here, which is one of the things that drew me to one of these to do an SBS as opposed to one of the other options out there. The big fight is always between Mossberg and Remington 870s. 870s are great shotguns. Even in the poor Remington years, the 870s were still pretty decent, because how do you mess up an 870? I mean, Remington did find some ways, but generally they've been solid and good to go. I just personally prefer the ergonomics of the 500s and 590s over the 870s. So for example, having this top safety just makes it inherently ambidextrous. It also makes it very intuitive and easy for me to tell, even when it's in my shoulder, what condition my gun is in. And I can very easily switch it onto fire. And then my main thing is where the pump release is. I have this little button back here on the rear end of the trigger guard, and that is what allows me to release the pump without having to pull the trigger. So I can, while maintaining a firing grip, just kind of swing my middle finger underneath, hit that with my knuckle, and that allows me to rack the pump on this shotgun. Very simple, very intuitive, and it doesn't take a lot of getting used to for that. So that's kind of how this thing is set up in a nutshell. Like I said, I do plan on swapping out the forend here, but let's go ahead, dig into a little bit more about what my experience has been with this shotgun. But first, let's go ahead and talk about patterning, because when we're talking about a short-barreled shotgun, we're talking about something shorter than what most people are used to, which is something I am very familiar with, ladies. So let's go ahead, roll into some footage of me at the range with this thing the other day, talking about how this thing patterns with buckshot and slugs. All right, so first up, we're going to do some of the Aguila mini shells. This is buckshot. We're going to be 7 yards from the target. I figured that's a reasonable distance for inside the home, kind of a maximum distance. So we'll see what kind of pattern we get at this distance, and then we'll move back a little bit. All right, let's take a look. All right, so I had to look it up on Aguila's website, but it looks like in this projectile there's number 4 buck, there's 7 pellets. Number 1 buck, there's 4 pellets. So that should be a total of 11 if my math isn't messed up here. And you can definitely tell, at least from my perspective here, different size projectiles. Looks like the wad went through here, but I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's definitely 6. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there's definitely some more here. But we're looking at about, I'm going to call that about 7 or 8 inches. So we are looking at that like 1 yard per, or 1 inch per yard traveled downrange. I'm going to step back and we're going to shoot it again. I'm going to mark this up, and I was aiming right at the letter A here. Let me grab a Sharpie. All right, so another round of the Aguila mini buckshot. We are 15 yards now. Let's see what happens. I'll try to aim a little bit lower so we can separate the two groups as much as possible. All right, so now we have a much bigger group. This is definitely more than double the previous one, and we either have some misses off target or some extra backsplash, but I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, 8 is over here on the very edge, and then 9, 10, and 11 are completely unaccounted for. Again, maybe there's some overlap here, but I'm inclined to believe that there's some off target. So double the distance, more than double the group size. I have a feeling any further and we're gonna really start barely having any consistency getting rounds on target. Let's try switching to something that's better known for staying together. Next up, again from 7 yards, we're doing the Hornady Critical Defense. This is their 2 3/4 inch double up buck. It's an 8 pellet double up buck. I've actually shot it out of this shotgun before and had really good tight results last time. Let's see if it's repeatable. This one I'm going to go lower, and then we'll try to aim higher on the next one so we get more opportunity to see that spread, hopefully. And I know this is also going to have considerably more recoil. All right, let's take a look. So I apologize for the windiness as always, but you can obviously tell our wad went through here, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's probably an 8th one in there, but we're looking at maybe 2, 2.5 inches at the most. So a really, really tight group there at 7 yards. Again, on the Aguila mini slugs, we had about a 7-inch group at the same distance, almost 3 times as big. So let's step back to 15 yards and see what happens. All right, so just like with the Aguila, even though we're only double the distance, just over double the distance, we are definitely over double the spread. So again, down here we have maybe 2.5 inches. Up here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all 8 stayed on target. We did have still a really tight cluster of 3, but out of the short barrel, even this opened up quite a bit. You can reference my CZ712 shotgun, a 20-inch, doing the same test with the same ammo, and it stayed a lot tighter, but still kept them all on target. And depending on, you know, how your center holds up, I think you could probably still step back to about 20 yards and still pretty well guarantee that all 8 pellets are staying on the bad guy if you pull the trigger properly. But now what we'll do is we'll launch some slugs into the head. I got some Remington Slugger slugs, so we'll go back out to 15 yards again and just see what kind of consistency with which I can hit the head on this guy. All right, so again, Remington 2 3/4 inch 1-out slugs. We're just gonna aim all of them into the head. Yeah, I got 4 of them, and we'll just see what kind of group we can get. Okay. Okay, well, the first one was off, so I'm gonna aim now center mass, and we'll hope for the best. Interesting. So I know what you guys are gonna say, well, that was your first shot because, you know, yada yada yada, it's a slug. But these Remington slugs, they must have a wad of some sort. If you know, please let me know in the comments, because this happened before with the CZ shotgun as well. But this is definitely not a slug. It's going to be just off paper, but there's also a pretty good divot here from some sort of wad. But this was 1, 2, 3. So definitely the Remington Slugger, it doesn't like nearly as much. I don't have any other slugs out here with me today, otherwise I would test it with some others. But if I do ever test this thing with different slugs, I'll put that on my Instagram or something. So definitely check that out for updates if there's ever going to be. But we're looking at probably 4.5, 5 inches at 15 yards. Not great, definitely, but it is what it is, I guess. So those results probably aren't surprising considering this is a cylinder bore short-barreled shotgun, but I figure those results are worth sharing with you guys. Hopefully you found those enlightening. Now, one thing I want to mention, when I was using the mini slugs, I did have to use this little adapter here. This is the mini clip from a company called Opsol. It basically is a little insert that allows you to shoot the mini slugs or mini shells out of your gun. For those of you not aware, these mini shells, like these are from Aguila. There's other companies that make these mini shells too. Instead of like a 2 3/4 inch shell, you're with a 1 3/4 inch shell, and that basically increases your capacity from 5+1 to like 8+1. Come on, there we go. So you can see it went shelled down. So let's swap that out. All right, so now we've got the little buffer installed. Let's see how this wants to work. Seems to have fixed it. So almost doubling your capacity. So kind of cool there. And I guess I didn't mention that this thing is a 5+1 under normal circumstances with 2 3/4. This can handle up to 3-inch shells. I did not fire any 3-inch shells because shotgun ammo has been sparse, and what I shot was, not easy to get a hold of in the first place. But that's probably something I'll try when I decide I want to punish myself more with this shotgun. So something to look forward to, I guess. But let's go ahead and talk about what my experience has been with this shotgun. Now, when I first got it in, like I said, I got this in October of 2020. So really in the heat of all the, ammo crunch and firearms crunch and stuff just being completely unobtainium, companies either being shut down or companies really pushing their production capacity to try to keep up with demand. Obviously, shotguns and Shockwaves specifically have been in exceedingly high demand over the last couple of years, and I feel like there were some casualties in that time. So, for example, when I got this thing, it had some. It seemed like it had not gone through the full attention to detail touches that I've gotten with previous Mossberg 590s in the past. So, for example, the ledge under here around the kind of loading gate, I guess, the loading area where the shell lifter is and everything, these edges were extremely sharp, like no joke, sharp enough to cut you if you ran your finger on there too aggressively. So I actually had to take some sandpaper and smooth these corners out. They're still a little bit sharp, but not nearly as bad as they were before. So just little things like that. Now, it didn't affect the function of it. This thing has been 100% reliable, assuming I'm using the little adapter here with the mini shells. But 100% reliable with normal factory ammunition. But again, things like that just goes to show that some of those kind of finishing touch things were being either ignored or skipped over to kind of slam some stuff out. So that's super disappointing, but again, I guess not terribly uncommon given the circumstances going on in the world today. Hopefully that stuff is being sorted out, but I don't know. Now, it is also worth mentioning, since I've been mentioning the mini shells, apparently there's the new 590S models, and those are designed to function with the mini shells without having to use an adapter. That would be appealing, because there was a point at which I forgot to take my adapter out before switching to full-size shells, specifically some slugs. Let me go ahead and cut that in here real quick. This is a good lesson not to forget to take your mini shell adapter out if you're going to switch away from mini shells. Obviously not ideal. If I'm going to be trusting this thing for self-defense, I need to make sure it's going to work and I don't have to make modifications between one thing or another. Now, I find it unlikely that I'd be using mini shells for this, given my kind of ideas of how I would use this, but nonetheless, there's that information for you. But overall, I've been really, really happy with this thing. It's been a ton of fun to shoot. I'm not a huge fan of shotguns, which is why I have a few of them. But I figure if I'm going to have a practical shotgun, I'm not going to be engaging things super far away. I need something small and maneuverable, and I feel like that is something a short-barreled shotgun provides for you. Now, some people will say, well, why not just use the standard Shockwave as it is? And to me, it's because they are unusable in a typical shotgun context. Like, you can't get a good sight picture, and people will say, well, just shoot from the hip. All you got to do is point a shotgun in a general direction, and it takes care of everything in that direction. And that's just simply not factual. So you have to be able to aim these, and the easiest way to do that is to get as many points of contact on the gun, which is both hands, stock in your shoulder, face on the stock, and that just allows you to line everything up biomechanically to increase your effectiveness with a firearm like this. So, like I said, I had shot other Shockwaves with just the bird's head grip, and it's really not practical again, in my opinion, for anything other than just having fun at the range. So a stock was a necessity for this, again, hence why I didn't even bother shooting this specific gun until I had a stock on it, because again, I think that's just dumb. But again, I'm really happy with this thing. It took a really long time for my Form 1 to go through, but it's just been a ton of fun. And again, it's probably the most practical of the shotguns that I currently own, and the most viable in the kind of firearms worldview or mindset that I personally have as someone who, again, is not overly a fan of shotguns to begin with. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything like this, or you have recommendations for things I should do, so like whether I should do that Streamlight Racker, or if you guys have other ideas of things I should do. I've even considered stripping the paint off and going to wood furniture and just kicking it old school like that. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. I do want to say thanks to my patrons for helping to make a video like this one possible. While, I obviously paid for the gun and everything. Like I said, shotgun ammo, especially 12 gauge, is not super abundant or readily available. And like this Hornady critical defense stuff that I was doing some testing with is definitely not cheap. So the support I get over on Patreon helps justify the time and money that I can invest into projects like this to be able to bring them in front of the camera for you guys. So because of that, I post all my content over there early. We have some exclusive content over there. We do live streams. We have a Discord server. We have a bunch of stuff I'm trying to get better about to help reward the people who support me over there, because they are really the ones helping to make things happen behind the scenes, and they deserve a lot more than I'm able to provide, at least at this point in time. But hopefully that'll be changing soon. Well, anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.